What is an E3 without PlayStation? Last year I tweeted that an E3 without PlayStation is like a pizza without cheese. It is an incredibly odd scenario that I never would have predicted when I first started in this industry, literally under the guidance of two emerging North Stars. The announcement that the PlayStation would arrive in North America in 1995, and the announcement of a massive video game super show that was to be held in Los Angeles, the Electronic Entertainment Exposition. I used these data points as part of my pitch document for the Electric Playground TV series, impressing upon broadcasters that a new 32-bit CD-ROM game system was coming from Sony that was going to create interactive imagery that would rival movies. And I would explain to these broadcasters what E3 stood for and how this massive exposition was about to bring the world together to celebrate the cultural significance of video games. I wasn't wrong. Both PlayStation and E3 launched in the same year in North America, 1995, and they were both incredibly important for this burgeoning medium, and they were a perfect pairing. Right from the first year of E3, where in a press conference and through subsequent PR material, Sony execs came out swinging about their price point and the power of their brand new system.
Better than Sega, we're better than Nintendo. We've got better graphics, we've got more developers lined up for the product.
This was capped off by an incredible party on a Sony movie lot where celebrities like Michael Jackson mingled with video game writers like Jeff Keighley, Jeff Gertzman, Andy McNamara, and me, an up-and-coming TV producer from Canada. PlayStation events, press conferences, and reveals just got bigger and better from there. We watched in awe as developers took a chance on Sony's big bet on a disc-based game console and developed state-of-the-art entertainment like Metal Gear Solid, Wipeout, and Final Fantasy VII. And then we saw, thanks in a big part to the success and maturation of the PlayStation platform, game makers becoming recognized as the very definition of pop culture tastemakers. Sony enjoyed thunderous success telling the world about the PlayStation 2 and its DVD drive capabilities at E3 2000.
How many units are you expecting to sell within the first week?
Fast, because obviously 1 million.
1 million.
The PlayStation 2 was an enormously successful platform for Sony. More than 150 million units were sold during its lifetime. And during that time, PlayStation and E3 celebrations became inseparable. Big-budget games on the PS2 were plentiful, and huge chunks of E3 floor space was dedicated to showing off massive titles like God of War, Devil May Cry, and Kingdom Hearts. This was an era before mobile games had really taken off, before online free-to-play entertainment was vying for game time. Hell, there was even a 24/7 video game TV network. But then broadband always connected internet happened and things in the video game industry changed forever. The emergence of YouTube would lead to millions of views of PlayStation's perhaps least favorite E3 moments, the reveal of the PlayStation 3 at E3 2006.
It's Ridge Racer. Ridge Racer! Remember that one?
An incredible platform with a very attractive Blu-ray player installed, the PS3 was nonetheless priced too high, and the launch library of games were filled with promises that perhaps couldn't be quite delivered on.
$599 US, $659 Canadian.
This all made for some very uncomfortable years at PlayStation. But the game devs persisted and built some incredible software for the PlayStation 3, like Naughty Dog's sensational The Last of Us. The sales came, the install base grew, and the E3 parties continued. The game industry changed a lot during the era of the PS3, and so did E3. When we started attending the expo in the mid-90s, there were hardly any cameras, but by 2010, cameras were everywhere, including on every phone. People were also able to live stream almost every single moment of the show instantly, every reveal, every mishap.
Okay, well, it is a live demo, so...
And it was during this transitional period between the launch of the PlayStation 3 and the launch of the PlayStation 4 that Sony really started to experiment. The reveal of the PlayStation 4 concept wasn't held at E3. Instead, it was at a PlayStation meeting event held in New York on February 20th, 2013. But E3 2013 did serve as one of the strongest showcases that PlayStation ever had at the expo, expertly using pricing and the lack of used game restrictions to take potshots at rival Microsoft.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
Thanks.
The The PlayStation 4 went on to have a phenomenal launch in November 2013, handily becoming the lead console in this current generation with sales in surplus of 100 million units. And over the last several years, the PlayStation 4 has had some dramatic moments at E3, like the confirmation that Fumito Ueda's long in development The Last Guardian was finally going to be available for the platform, or the stunning orchestral showcase of the reimagined God of War at E3 2016. In my opinion, the very best E3 that PlayStation ever had.
I am hungry.
Now, as we all know, PlayStation sat out of E3 2019, expressing that they were hard at work on their new console and weren't quite ready to talk about the PlayStation 5. Now, the PlayStation 5 launches later this year, but Sony has said that they will not be at E3, and I've got some thoughts that I would like to share with you about that. But first, I wanted to hear from our friends across the industry.
When we got the news that, once again, Sony Interactive was going to not be having a presence on the show floor at E3, the Electronic Entertainment Expo, I was actually pretty shocked. Now, last year, I think, was a little bit surprising to a lot of people, but knowing that it was the end of the console generation for the PS4 and that they didn't really have any standout titles that they were going to want to showcase at E3 because Days Gone was already released by that time, it wasn't that surprising. It's an expensive show, I get it. But this year, when they're going to be going up against Xbox Series X and Microsoft really dominating the E3 news cycle because they're intentionally sitting it out, I think it's a mistake. I actually think it's a very big mistake. Obviously, a lot of people are excited about PS5, myself included. I'm definitely going to be getting one at launch, but I think to assume that Sony's going to have as successful a generation with the PS5 as they did with the PS4 is just plain hubris and could become problematic for them in the long term. But we know that they've had a presence at PAX and at some other consumer shows, and hopefully they're going to bring the PlayStation experience back this year, but it's still never going to have the same amount of punch as becoming the top news story, the top headline from the week of E3. So I guess we'll have to wait and see, but overall, I think it's a big mistake, and I'm pretty bummed about it.
Sony skipping E3 is something that I think a lot of people, including myself, have seen coming for quite a while. And not just Sony in and of themselves. E3 is slowly becoming more and more irrelevant. What do I mean by that? In the early days of E3, information wasn't exchanged as quickly and as freely on the internet. I mean, if you were lucky, you had dial-up at best. And with E3, there was always a ton of surprises because there wasn't as many leakers. Information wasn't posted months upon months before the next year's E3 was even a thought. Nowadays, you have so many industry leakers, you have so many industry insiders, and everyone is constantly connected to the internet that it kind of makes E3 useless. Every time I see E3 for the past, I would say 5 or 6 years, in most cases, I knew everything that was coming. And that's why I think Sony is skipping E3. They just don't see it being relevant to their product and their brand anymore. I don't see E3 being relevant much longer. I think its days are numbered. And with Sony not attending E3 2019 and 2020, it's a big sign that shows that times are changing.
You know, I have to say, as someone who's gone, it sounds pretty disappointing. I mean, you know, E3 is the video game mecca of the world, so you kind of want all the big players there. And from the times that I've been there, their booth is usually one of the most impressive, and they always have a great slate of games. Now, I can kind of understand where they're coming from, simply because there are so many other avenues. E3 has a ton of noise. You know, they also have that PlayStation Experience thing now. But that said, I do think there is something that is missing when you don't have sort of all the big three on the floor together and you can sort of walk and sample their wares. That said, I'm super hyped for the PS5. I would want more information. I want to know as much as I can, but I guess Sony's going to sort of, you know, milk that and only put out the information slowly but surely to build the hype properly. Anyways, you know, so I guess a little bit of a sadness about this, but a decision that I can understand.
Ultimately, I think it's fine. I think the industry is going to be okay. Personally, I miss them being at E3. I think it was fun when Microsoft was on the show floor, Nintendo was there, and Sony was there. But from a business perspective or standpoint, I don't think Sony skipping E3 the year the PlayStation 5 comes out is what's going to make or break the PS5. It's going to be many other features than that. Price, and where the Xbox Series X comes in price-wise and stuff like that, and features, always on, always connected, all of that stuff. Sony being at E3 is not necessary. They will have their own big event, announcing it, even if it's just a live stream or just a video. E3, in the way that old folks like me remember it and talk about it, is a relic, and certainly something that isn't needed anymore, in my opinion. Times have changed, and I think Sony is smart for looking past it.
Yeah, it's disappointing to me as a gamer that Sony has decided to skip E3 once again, because as a gamer, I want E3 to be the Super Bowl of video games, where everybody shows up and it's just one big, massive event with tons of huge announcements. And one of the first parties skipping it means that's just a lot less likely to happen. Yeah, it'll still be great to have Microsoft there, Nintendo does the Direct, but it won't be the same again without PlayStation, just as it was last year.
Well, now I remember back when Sony was just a little toddler and they came out with that nice toy, the PlayStation, I used to look forward to seeing them at E3, but now I'm kind of glad that they're not going to have a press conference this time, because I got a lot of gray hairs now, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing that big empty space on the E3 show floor where I can go and maybe lie down and just take it easy this time.
I don't expect Sony to really ever go back to E3, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It seems that Sony themselves just decided that it's an unnecessary thing to even go to. I mean, if you consider the main reason that E3 came about being that it was a good trade show to go to if you were a bigger company who wanted to basically talk face-to-face to third parties, retailers, vendors, all at once, it was a good spot to go to, and it slowly turned into a place of hype, not necessarily a place of business dealing. Sure, some still happen, but now we look at E3 as the moment where big things get announced and revealed. And it's great for fans like myself and even you watching this now, but for Sony to look at this and ask, do we spend tens of millions of dollars to approach E3 and try to show something off? Or do we just tweet about it? A couple of years ago, Sean Layden, who is now of course not with Sony, said the world has changed, but E3 hasn't necessarily changed with it. And that's the biggest thing now. It was a good way to get the word out before. However, with the rise of social media and how powerful these companies are on social media to get the word out themselves, take Sony talking about the PS5 logo, which looks strangely like the PS4 logo with just a 5 over the 4, ends up trending on Twitter and blowing up on Instagram, setting a record for likes by a game company. Why would you spend tens of millions of dollars to go to E3 when you can just tweet from the office and get a similar effect? Couple that with the fact that they do Destination PlayStation now in February every year so that they can talk to retailers, vendors, and even third parties themselves. What's the point of E3?
They weren't there last year because they didn't really have much to announce. This year, there's a PS5. You think that would be like a big thing for them?
That's true.
Yeah. So
they're going to own it themselves.
If they don't want to be on stage, I'm fine with that. The stage isn't important anymore. Listen, it should be online. It should be through interactive demos. It should be through like on the spot. Like you can have their live conference, but put it the way they're supposed to have it instead of having like malfunctions and everything on stage. Just have it the way you want it. The presentation should be perfect the way they have it. So that I agree with.
Yeah. I always think back of the Switch release when they finally revealed that online. Like it was a controlled, media thing, advertisement.
So they showed the way they want to show it.
Yeah. I think it's better that way.
Yeah, and I guess the spotlight, they're gonna have more control, but it gives them all the spotlight at one time to see the PS5.
You ever seen also another point too, to remember all the mess ups that they had on E3 when they do like live demonstrations and stuff. Like
that's the fun of it.
I do enjoy those.
Well, the Skyward Sword with Nintendo, I remember that one.
Oh, there's tons of them.
Yeah,
there's tons of them. Ridge Racer.
But I don't. It could be cringy. But I don't want E3 to just go by the wayside. I do want it to stay important, but I think it should be delivered a different way.
Yeah.
So
I think Sony should come back. They should come back to E3 eventually when E3 has a format shake up a bit. When it's more interactive, make some changes, and hopefully they'll be there in the future.
But if they continue this, everybody might follow suit, and E3 will be good. No more.
Which would suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be sad. That's true.
Got to keep it going.
The industry has changed. The way that these publishers and developers can get their message across, you don't need E3 the way you may have even 10 years ago. So for Sony to now take a second year and not go to E3 when they have a hardware launch coming out with the PlayStation 5 says a lot. It says that this event isn't something they need to have to get their message across to their consumers. So what I think is going to happen is I think PlayStation will have their own event right before May, early June, but before E3, and they're going to show off the PlayStation 5. Here's the PlayStation 5. Here's all the cool things that it can do. Here's some of the games that you can expect. No price. After E3, which, hey, Microsoft's probably going to show the Series X, all their games and pricing. They're going to have another event where, all right, let's invite the media and let them get hands-on with some of these games, and then they're going to announce the price. Now, is that going to be a PlayStation Experience type of deal where the fans are invited? Are they going to do it at Gamescom? Who knows? But the whole point is Sony has now created flexibility with their messaging, and they can talk directly to their consumers on their terms. So PlayStation leaving E3, I think it's a good thing.
When you're a company as big as Sony with, a console to launch, you would think E3 would be the place that they'd want to be to showcase the newest hardware. Give me that PlayStation 5 goodness. Give me all those videos. Give me the hype. Give me the sizzle reel. Give me all the trailers of games that are going to be gonna have to wait for probably a couple more years to play anyway. But still, no, E3 is usually, that fanfare. It's that thing everybody waits for. It's the Super Bowl of game events. And now it's just becoming a overcrowded trade show where companies are sort of falling by the wayside and doing their own thing. Is this a sign of things to come for E3? One can only assume. But I guess we're going to have to wait and find out.
As a business decision, Sony deciding to skip E3 makes absolute sense. Instead of trying to compete with Microsoft or Nintendo for the biggest splash or the biggest announcement, Sony instead has the ability to dictate exactly when and where it will release details about its upcoming PS5. This means that it can control the news narrative and the press cycle regarding the new hardware, such as the upcoming launch titles, the hardware specs, or even simply the release date and price for the machine.
In 2019, I returned to E3 after being absent for a couple years, and I really didn't notice a downturn in excitement without one of the major hardware companies officially on board. I think this gives E3, the video game event, a chance to reinvent itself. That opportunity grew with the announcement by Jeff Keighley that he will no longer be overseeing the E3 Coliseum happenings this year. As for Sony, it allows them to focus on the launch of PlayStation 5. For gamers, that may pay off in the end. It may wind up that the glass is half full rather than half empty.
Now check this out, man. PlayStation skipping E3 2020. I want to tell y'all what that really means and what's going on in the industry right now. You know what I mean? So shout out to Victor, my dude, Electric Play. Love y'all, man. Let's get it. So look, first off, PlayStation put out a logo from PS4 to PS5. All they did was switch a number. And they got the most likes ever on Instagram. Everybody going crazy just over a number change. You understand what I'm saying? So what does that tell you? What that tells you is this. If you look at E3, not to say E3 isn't important, but it doesn't matter as much as it used to. And it's cost effective for Sony to continue to do their own thing and focus on the core, focus on the hearts of the gamer so they could grow their business and grow their brand even more from the core gamer. So what I love about this is that it's a stance of PlayStation saying, you know what, we going community first in every aspect of our business. And I believe this is the way out the gate that they're going to potentially surpass even the great PS2 with over 150 million sold.
I think PlayStation skipping E3 is good for them. I know it's not a popular opinion at all, but I think it gives them the chance to own that moment and not compete, rather than have to be one of the press conferences, right? And have either, as usual, them end it, with the exception of a Nintendo Direct immediately following it the next day, and then everybody running out to play games and everybody talking about what Microsoft said and all the direct comparisons of that and what the hell did EA Play do. This time, PlayStation gets to have it whenever they want to have it. They get to come out, they get to own the messaging, they get to own the beat. And so I think it's good for them as a company because, they get to stand out
So thoughts on Sony skipping E3? I think it's good for them. I think for them to own their message and kind of stomp to the beat of their own drum makes sense for what they want to do. It's interesting compared to last year where there wasn't really much to show since we're at the end of the PS4 cycle, and with Last of Us 2 coming out and Ghost of Tsushima, right? Like those already have their own stories, and so I understand why they wouldn't feel like they need to have their whole own press conference to really drive those points home. Those points drive their self home. And so this E3, for them having the PS5 on the horizon, might seem like a strange move for them not to appear. That said, like I said before, I think for them to have their own voice, have their own time, be able to put together their own stream, not necessarily worry about having a stage presence and audience reaction and having to pull together a bunch of different games just included in the press conference. I feel like all that stuff they can throw out the window. Just doing what they want to do and owning that message makes sense.
It does seem like E3 itself as an event is on the downgrade, and we've been sort of seeing that over many years at this point, with Nintendo leaving and moving more towards directs and EA moving offsite for its EA Play event. And I think something like EA Play is sort of a harbinger of what E3 might become in the future. I think it will remain relevant, but I think as it's gone over the years, E3 has gone from the 3 days of the event to sort of like a week of adjoining events around E3. And I think that's sort of the model that will work better for E3 as an event. That's how E3 retains its relevance in a world that has PAXs, in a world that has Gamescoms, or companies that can just start up their own events and reach directly out to fans.
What year is this? 2020? You mean the second year in a row that they said they're not coming? We at Ars Technica are not surprised at all. This absolutely makes sense from their own data perspective. What they did last year by skipping E3 and continuing to control the narrative anyway in terms of YouTube videos makes sense that they could continue that with this year's E3. Now, whether they skip other frequent shows, particularly Tokyo Game Show, that's another question. I mean, and that's a cultural distinction in terms of Japanese shows. But in terms of what E3 has to offer for its timing and for the way media is accessed, E3 is changing, and we all know that. Not only do we have PlayStation skipping, we're going to see more people, I think, say how much they're scaling back or how much they're not going to be involved. I think that Sony's going to be just fine, and I think the other companies that are at E3 are going to be just fine.
Let's face it, with more conferences such as PAX, EGX, Gamescom, Tokyo Game Show, E3, there's a lot going on. Plus, let's not forget the fact that bigger brands like Xbox, Sony, and Nintendo have found vehicles and avenues to speak directly to their consumers and control that messaging via State of Play. These have become huge platforms, allowing Sony to own the message that they want to and to not get lost. And that kind of brings us to why Sony's doing this. Why is Sony deciding to try and scream at the top of their lungs at the same time everyone else is? Everyone in that week is trying to get their messaging out, and how easy it could be to lose a key part of your message. Take a beat, take a couple months, take a couple weeks. Own your own specialized event later. Don't spend all your money at E3, spend it somewhere else. Control your messaging and get it directly to the fans. I think it's actually a really smart move from Sony.
I think Sony's doing the right thing, because going to E3 is very expensive. You have to fly in your booth, you have to fly in your people, you have to feed them, you have to pay them a lot of money. It's millions and millions and millions of dollars to rent the space, to do the 4 or 5 days of presentation. It's crazy, it's crazy. And the companies don't like to spend money, they like to make money. So I think that in the future, Sony may produce small videos like Nintendo does. You know, you sit in your studio, you talk to a camera, you read a prompter, an hour later, your product is in the can, put it on the internet, and that's it. The message, catches fire on the web, and bang, it costs you what? Not much.
Hey, Mom. Yeah, it's me, Sean. Yeah, I heard. Yeah, no, Sony isn't coming back to E3 for the second year in a row. No, they'll probably never come back. So that just kind of leaves like Xbox to do the thing, which is kind of sad. Because this is you're right, 2020, this is the year of all the next generation consoles. This should have been the biggest E3 that we've had in a long, long time. Yeah, I was really excited about it. But I'm not anymore. So, but still, Xbox is going to do their thing. The industry will be fine. Sony will be fine. Everything's going to be great. And yeah, you can probably expect to have more of those like state of play things. Yeah, no, I agree. They're pretty derivative, Nintendo does it better. I couldn't have said it better myself. Nintendo does it better, and Sony just ripped off their entire format, and that's probably how we're going to learn about the PS5. Or maybe we'll get a Wired article. I don't know, Mom. I don't know. I don't know why you'd ever do that. E3 is super exciting, and we've been celebrating it for decades now, so it's really too bad that Sony is turning its back on E3. But I get it. I make, you listen to the podcast, you listen to all this stuff. We're super harsh on any E3 presentation as it is. So why would they ever come back? Last time they were in a church and they had a guy at the flute and we all made fun of it. So they're like, screw you guys. Yep. Well, we'll see. I'll still be watching Xbox. It'll be really interesting to see what those guys do. Perhaps they can make Sony regret not being there. Who knows? We'll see. But, dinner on Sunday? Okay, we'll talk more about it then. Cool. Okay, bye.
It's a really sad time for the industry. And I know that there's some sort of stuff going on in the background with the people who run E3, being very difficult to deal with. But E3 was Christmas for gamers. It was the time where the industry really got together and we just, we shared that love for this amazing passion that we have, which is the gaming industry and video games. And E3 was that one time where I felt like all the journalists, all the, influencers, and all of us gamers would, sit at home with our couches and we would just discuss games and get excited about what the future has to offer. And I think with PlayStation not being part of E3 2020, it's very hard for me to get excited for the show.
Thank you to everybody that contributed. Your insight is always appreciated. Now, what do I think about PlayStation not being at E3? Well, I can tell you that I am extremely disappointed. I understand that this is a business and there are hundreds of things to consider before committing to booth space at an expo like E3. I know that corporations don't need conferences to promote their work now. I also applaud Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft's yearly roadshows, events, and constant stream of video content to engage their respective communities. But there's something to be said about E3's ability to bring the world together in one place at one time to celebrate the medium of video games. Like Jeff Keighley's ability to bring Nintendo's Reggie Fils-Aimé, Microsoft's Phil Spencer, and Sony's Sean Layden together for the Game Awards, the world just wants to see game companies side by side showing everybody that they're in this together and they've got an incredible story to tell. PlayStation has always had an incredible story at E3, and as someone that has been there every year to hear it and report on it, I have to confirm that an E3 without PlayStation is like a pizza without cheese. PlayStation. Thank you so much for watching this video. Remember, if you like the content, make sure you hit that like button. You can hit the subscribe button. You can share this video. We will see you very soon. And until then, play forever.